So just to let y'all know right up top, Fantastic Four First Steps is super. Wait, that doesn't sound right. Oh, fantastic. It was right there. It was fantastic. Hello, interwebs. I hope you are all doing well, especially after that lame joke of an opening, because I am here to review the latest Marvel movie, Fantastic Four First Steps. I will apologize right up front because I was actually hoping to review this movie with my partner, Erin, who I reviewed Superman with, because she also went to see this movie with me. Unfortunately, she's going out to a music festival with a friend today because, she has friends and relationships and likes to leave the house from time to time. Yeah, what a jerk. Why can't you just be a nerd and hang out inside all day talking about nerdy shit with me? Anyways, talking about Fantastic Four First Steps, I will say overall, I really, really like this movie. And quite frankly, I think it's probably the best Marvel has been in a long, long while. With the exception, of course, of Thunderbolts, which I also really, really liked. I don't think I did a review of that one, but I really ended up liking Thunderbolts. But what I kind of like as a distinguisher between Thunderbolts and this one, because I do end up liking both movies, is Thunderbolts, for the most part, feels kind of like more of the same from Marvel. I think some of the best it's ever been, and has, I think, without spoiling, a really great ending that is different than the usual blockbuster CGI fights that Marvel usually ends up doing that we get at the end of Thunderbolts. So for that, I actually really, really appreciate it, switching it up a lot. But it also, just in terms of tone and style, for the most part, feels very similar to what we've gotten from a lot of Marvel movies. This movie, though, with Fantastic Four, feels very, very distinct. Like, yes, it does have a lot of the Marvelisms in there in some respects, such as a big battle fight at the end of the movie. So, like, some of the structure is very similar, but a lot of the tone and feel and vibe just it feels very unique to this movie. And I think even if the structure of the plot is relatively similar, the actual moment to moment of this story feels so different that it really drew me in a really, really great way. And then the other thing that I also kind of want to touch upon, because I know a lot of people are going to be comparing it to it, is Superman. And I will say, I personally like Superman a little bit more than this movie, and I say that not to do the Marvel versus DC thing that, is typical. The reason I bring that up is actually there are a few things that I think keep this movie from making me really love it, despite there being a lot of similarities actually between the two movies. And it just comes down a little bit, I think, more to taste on my part. I can explain why I have that taste that way, but it may not be something that bothers you as much. But it does come a little bit down to, I think, a difference in Marvel versus DC, but actually a difference between Marvel versus DC movies specifically, and specifically James Gunn's kind of movies, when at least it seems to be how he's going to be positioning DC going forward. Because in actuality, the problem that I have with this movie is less a problem in the comics, in terms of how people discuss Marvel versus DC. I'm dancing around the issue. I'll talk about it a little bit, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a tease that when I say I like Superman a little bit more than this movie, I actually have I think there's an interesting comparison to be made between the two, not just a DC rules, Marvel sucks sort of discussion. But let me just talk about this movie on its own terms for a little while here. I think the biggest thing to talk about is just the retrofuturism. I adored that. I am a big retrofuturism person. I usually generally like VHS retrofuturism, kind of like the cyberpunk, cassette tape, like that sort of, like the Alien movies. Like that sort of retrofuturism is kind of the stuff that I really, really enjoy. But I just enjoy the aesthetic generally speaking. Like Fallout is another great series that does something similar. So this having that 1960s retrofuturism look with like TV, like little giant tube TV screens everywhere in Times Square, and just the aesthetic of a lot of things was really cool, and I just liked seeing that, and it gave again this throwback vibe to this movie that I thought was a lot of fun. Like, it actually made me really intrigued to get to know the universe again. Like, when I go to a Marvel movie now, I generally am there to be like, all right, let me check up on my favorite characters or what kind of the world is like inching forward, especially inching forwards right now as we get to the new Avengers movie, and it's just been sort of stalling for a very long time to get to that point. Here it was like, oh, I actually have a new world to enter into. And again, it was very similar to the Superman movie in that, like, I liked that we stepped into a world that felt like it was already very well lived in. The Superman movie did this great job. Again, I'm not going to spoil the Superman movie for any of you who haven't seen it, but I am going to talk about some differences. But the Superman movie was really, really great about being like, oh, this is a lived-in world that has had a whole history before we've stepped into this movie. And Fantastic Four here does the same thing. I think this movie takes a little bit more time to set up this world specifically, as well as the Fantastic Four's role within it than Superman did. And I think that's to its benefit, especially here, for a couple different reasons. Like, Superman, we can generally get the vibe of him, and he's also only one character, whereas Fantastic Four are generally less well-known than Superman. I mean, they're well-known, but they are not Superman. And also, you have a few more characters to introduce here. So getting us a little bit more of their history and where their place is in this world, I think works well in this regard here. And speaking of, let's go through all the characters. I'll start off with Joseph Quinn, Human Torch. I was surprised by how much I liked him. I always had fun with the Chris Evans version of the character. The less said about Fan Four Stick, the better. As much as I love Michael B. Jordan as an actor, he's fantastic. There's less said about that movie, the better. But I always enjoyed the Chris Evans one when I was a kid because he was sort of this like crash womanizer, playboy kind of guy. But here, we get Joseph Quinn's Human Torch. We get the guy who's like interested in women, but what I really liked about it was that it wasn't that like playboy womanizer like thing that we got from like Vanessa Kirby's Sue Storm would like joke about like he's available women like ladies, and he's looking and he clearly has like a desire to like go be with the ladies. But there's an interesting respect there that I really liked and appreciated, especially in today's day and age right now. Hey, people respecting women is cool. I really enjoyed it, especially like there's a whole subplot here. And I'm going to go full spoilers here with Silver Surfer, who is played by a lady now, as much as the anti-woke people like to be upset about it, even though she's a literal character of the comics. Anyways, when he meets her, he gets really interested in her language and like figuring it out with these old recordings that they've been receiving. That again they've been getting on vinyl, that he's like got recorded on vinyl, which is again a cute touch. And he actually takes the time to like learn her culture and learn her history. And yes, it's part of the like she's about to lead to the destruction of my home planet of it all. But you get this sense that like he's a guy who pays attention to the people that he's interested in, and he actually wants to learn about them. And I just liked that vibe of it, where it was like, yes, he's doing this to try to fight back against her, learn something about her, but there is also just a greater sense of like he's not a guy who just hits on women just because he wants to be a womanizer. So I really like that characterization of him. The other one we get is Ben Grimm, and I like that Ben Grimm in this isn't like putting on like the rock, like a big voice to play the Thing. He's just being a normal kind of guy who just happens to be a rock monster to a degree. I know it's not rock, it's skin because it grows a beard at one point in the movie. I know the difference. Just all you nerds out there, I know. But I liked that most movies that we've had the Thing in have focused on how he's kind of depressed because he looks different. He doesn't fit in because he looks like the Thing now. Which is a fine story. I don't mind stories like that. Quite obviously, I resonate with stories of people feeling like they are seen as other in the world. So I get that. But I like that we didn't go that route here. Like he's just part of the world. Everyone accepts him. It's kind of normal. Kids like seeing him, and he like plays with the kids at one point in the movie, and he just kind of seems very happy in his skin, quite literally. And I really liked seeing that. And, it was more about him trying to reconnect with his roots back in New York City. And, even his Jewish heritage comes up at a certain point with Natasha Lyonne. honestly, I feel like you could have done more with that. I feel like that was actually one part of this plot that didn't get enough attention, especially if you're going to bring in Natasha Lyonne. Love Natasha Lyonne. She's phenomenal. Outside of, actually, I believe she's like supporting an AI movie recently, which is weird. So, maybe I'm less all in on Natasha Lyonne at the moment. I have to go and remember what all that was about. But regardless, I always enjoy her presence when she appears in things. Poker Face is phenomenal. So, there was a part of me, if you watched Marvel's What If, the Disney Plus show, she has a role in that show that I won't spoil that is very, very fun, that I actually really enjoy, that I kind of hope we do get to see a live-action version of. It's a multiverse, so maybe this Natasha Lyonne character, Fantastic Four, will end up that character. She can play the other character in another movie. But, I was sad that we didn't get that here. But regardless, I wish we had actually gotten more of her time with Ben Grimm. It does feel like that story didn't get as much as it should, especially for an actress as amazing as Natasha Lyonne. But what was there was really good. What I will say, though, I think is the beating heart of this movie, right from the top, is Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby as Reed Richards and Sue Storm. And they are wonderful together. Like, you really buy between these two that they are a loving couple who care about each other, but can also like recognize, each other's patterns and how they, how they sometimes hurt each other based on like just the things that they think about. Like, there's a point in the movie, and I'm going full spoilers here, where she points out, like, Reed, you constantly think of the worst case scenario. You're constantly having anxiety about the future and what's coming next, and you're not being here in the moment. You're not thinking about what's like being here with us and what this means. And she reads him very well, and we've seen, that's how Reed thinks. He's constantly thinking of the next 10 billion things over and over again. He worried before the baby was born. He worried when the baby was born. All of these things play out really well, and it's a common anxiety, I think, in any couple. I mean, I have a similar thing with my partner, not to get too deep into a relationship, but I'm the person who has a lot of anxiety about the future, right? Like, I'm constantly worried about what's coming next, what I should do, that's my thing. And she sometimes gets, more, depressed about thinking about the past and things that like she could have done better and things that she could have fixed up. Like, this is actually a thing that we like balance each other well on in a weird way. So that is a real thing that happens in some relationships that I really, really enjoyed seeing here. So that played really well. Some other really cool things that some other things too. I liked how small this movie felt in a weird way. Like, yes, we're dealing with Galactus and big, world-ending problems, but like the cast wasn't too big. Like, it was actually probably seems to me one of the smaller casts of any Marvel movie, if I had to really think about it. And I like that because what it gave us overall was a very close familial feel between all of our characters. I loved that most of all for this movie. Like, there was just an intimacy between our four Fantastic Four and the fifth one as well. That just felt very homey, and I just liked being around them. And you again get a sense that these are people that love and care about each other and know each other, and will push back against each other, can hurt each other from time to time, but like, they just know each other and care about each other and love each other. And there was no false drama in that. It just felt very, very real, even when things were getting dark between them. And I thought that was really sweet, and I loved the like quieter tone that sometimes this movie got to, especially when we are dealing with something as big as Galactus. Which brings me to Galactus. I will say, I really liked how Galactus was set up in this movie. The first part of this movie where they go into space and confront him and he like stands up. And I got to see this movie in D-Box because it was the only theater that was available because everything was sold out for me. Which, if you don't know, I've never done D-Box before. This is literally my first time. They're like the chairs that kind of move and like shake when you're sitting in them. So it's kind of like a weird little roller coaster ride. I enjoyed it. It was actually kind of fun. I don't know if I would ever go out of my way for it because it was expensive as hell. But yeah, if I ever get the chance again, it's like, oh yeah, that was good, especially for a blockbuster movie. I don't know if I want like a small indie film to watch that with, but like a Marvel movie, sure, it's already kind of a roller coaster. Anyways, I say all of that is like, when Galactus showed up, my chair was like shaking and rumbling when he was standing up, and I was like, ooh, this is cool. Just the sense of scale of him, especially when they like encountered his ship and going into space and like they end up right in front of the planet killer. Like, the sense of scale here really, really worked for me. I'm a space nerd. I love space shit, so all of that like was just really, really really cool, was just my jam. I love seeing the like Retrofuture rocket, the FTL drive that they had to put on. All of that was great. My one knock, and this is me nitpicking, so this is a criticism, but it is a nitpicking criticism. When they had the thing when they were going around the, I think it was the neutron star, so almost a black hole, that they were trying to get like Julia Garner's, invisible. Why am I blanking on Silver Surfer? Jesus, get her trapped in the gravity well, so there would be a time dilation between where they are at and where she's at. Which I thought was a cool idea. I like that, like them trying to separate a little time dilation there. That's a cool science thing that is real. That if you like get her in front of you, it'll take her longer to get out just because of that time dilation. So like that. The thing that I'm gonna be nerdy about is that when she was giving birth, Vanessa Kirby was, and they're slinging around this thing. They make a whole point of they don't have gravity, and so she needs to be strapped down so she can actually push and give birth. But they are accelerating. They're like slingshotting themselves around this star. So like they should have been thrown back in their seats. They shouldn't have been floating around. They literally were near a gravity well. So like the star should have given them some gravity. They were clearly feeling the pull of that gravity well. So the star should have been pulling them to the side of their ship. And then their acceleration should have been pushing them to the back. So, just something that it bothered me. No one else cares. But the fact that they made a point of it, and I was like, no, that doesn't make sense. You're accelerating. You should definitely be pushed back in your seat. Anyways, I'm an Expanse fan. I have to get all nerdy about that kind of shit. So that's a nitpick. It doesn't really matter. Going back to Galactus, though, I like the idea that he wants their kid, and he gives them. Well, I'll save the Sophie's Choice bit for the end, because it gets into some other interesting stuff with this movie. At the end, though, I did really like the big battle with Galactus, but it felt a little bit quick and easy. I honestly, for someone like Galactus, I honestly wanted a little bit longer of a fight, and it felt a little bit easy at the end, and it did end up becoming that sort of like big CGI battle that all Marvel movies kind of get at the end of the film. There's a couple clever twists in all of it, like Sue Storm almost dying, which almost made me lose interest in the movie, because I'm like, oh, are we gonna really fridge the woman? Are we really doing that in the first movie? I was surprised that they would kill her off, so I was like, oh, okay, they're bringing her back with the kid. So that ended up being that thing, but I was like, oh man, we really fridging the lady here. So thank God they didn't go that route. So yeah, I liked all of that stuff, and especially the ending. Vice versa. That I liked all of the stuff. The ending, though, was a little bit like of a disappointment, not like a bad one, but a little bit like, okay, yeah, this is what the movies do. This is what Marvel movies do. Big fighty fight. That's fine. I enjoy it. But after something like Thunderbolts, which did kind of something a little bit different, I would have liked that. So now I'll get into what I want to call criticisms. But they're ones that I will admittedly be very clear are touchstones for me, especially lately. Because things that like I'm sort of like just clocking a little bit more and I'm sensitive to, and this is by no means the worst version of this, but it's something I've just been thinking about a lot lately. Just in terms of, if any of you watch my video essays over on my main channel, a lot of my video essays are about like the stories our society tells and like the ideas that permeate our culture that we just aren't critically thinking about, that we just sort of take as read. And I think about that a lot when I watch these movies, and I just was clocking a few things here. The big one for me is we get this Sophie's Choice of, do you sacrifice your kid? From Galactus says, sacrifice your kid, give your kid to me, and I'll save your planet. And they say no. And obviously everyone on Earth is very pissed about that fact, being like, you're being selfish. And then Vanessa Kirby gives that speech. And I initially was sort of like, all right, what is this movie going for? Because there is, again, I've talked about this in other things. Lee Edelman is a writer that I don't have the book right here, but there's a book by Lee Edelman, which is he's a queer writer. And he writes about this idea about reproductive futurism, how a lot of our, culture is around this symbol of the child is the future. And not necessarily a like literal biological child, like a literal kid, but like this symbol of like we do things for the next generation. And that, it revolves around a lot of heterosexual culture, like, man, woman, kid, have the normal family so you can like keep birthing more kids to recreate, our, capitalist or, colonial or fascist or whatever utopia on into the future. But it's just like a thing that permeates our culture. So I was worried that this movie was going to get into this idea of like we sacrifice everything for our biological imperative, sacrifice everything for the child. Again, the symbol of the child. Like, yes, there's a literal baby child in this movie, but this is a movie written by people. It is a movie cast by people. They picked the script, so it's a movie that's choosing this narrative to tell. So I was a little bit hesitant on like that storyline, but the movie does actually take some steps to do some things that I really, really like that kind of like worked for me, such as Vanessa Kirby's speech where she says something along the lines of, I will not sacrifice my child for the earth, but I will not sacrifice my earth for my child. And I liked that what she does in that moment, she connects all of humanity as a family, and says like, we're all in this together. We're going to fight together. We're not going to, it gave me like, again, a very Marvelism. It was like, we don't trade lives, Captain America thing. So it is a very Marvel, theme, I guess, coming up here. And I like that it wasn't just about protecting the kid. It was connected to like, no, we're all in this together. We protect everybody. So it became a little less about the biological imperativeness of it all going on here. So there was that element. And then there was also a really great scene that was actually very similar to Superman. And I'll start bringing my connection to Superman a little bit here too, where Pedro Pascal says to the baby, I want you to tell me who you're going to be. I'm going to stop looking. I'm going to stop researching all this stuff. I want you to tell me who you're going to be. And then there's a little joke. It's like, hey, if you're going to be a, big galactic eating monster, like, let me know. I'd like to know that now sooner than later. Which is cute. But again, especially coming from Pedro Pascal, who has been a very trans supportive person, I'm sure that was something that he was very proud to shoot, just knowing him and, his sister and everything. Again, it's not overtly about being trans, but it's a thing that resonates, I think, in that sense of like letting kids choose who they want to be. Because I think, I did a recent video over on my main channel if you want to go check it out. It just came out yesterday and it's tanking. So please go watch it because I really love that video. It's a very personal one. But I talk about in that like a lot of oppression of queer people comes from like parents trying to be like, you need to fit my expectations of you. And those expectations usually are based in, whatever the culture tells you to be. So it's like if a trans person comes out, it's like, oh, I wanted you to be the boy that I always thought you were going to be because I wanted the boy to go on to, marry a woman and be successful. Same thing with queer people. It's like, oh, you're gay. I wanted you to be straight. Or it's like, that's the common theme. And so, a parent saying like, I'll let you tell me who you are. I like that as a theme. And as Superman had a very similar theme with his dad in a scene that made me cry while watching that movie. This one wasn't as powerful, I think, as that one, but it was a good scene that did it. And again, it's less a little bit about like the biological imperative of it all. But the other, so like those elements that I did like. However, there is part of this movie that is still like, but child is special because of biology, and Galactus wants child because he's special. And then also, if you have to see the after credits sequence, it appears Doctor Doom is also after the child because child is special. And I dislike those kind of narratives just on their face. So while this movie does a lot of like hedging off some of the worst elements of that type of symbolism that I don't really like, and I think did a decent job of that, it still ends up at its core being this thing that I don't particularly love of like baby is special and we need to say baby from big monster because baby has special powers because of biology. So that element just baked into this as a concept, and it's just something that personally as a preference I don't like as much, just being very frank about it. And then we get into the other element of this where, like, again, I talked about like connecting it to family. And maybe this is me reading too much into this, but it was something that bothered me, and this is a distinct difference from Superman, and kind of getting into that discussion that I've hinted at numerous times here, is while we're talking about, like, there's moments in this movie where, like, they're trying to build the teleporter and all of that stuff, and, like, Reed does this thing, is like, we all need to do our part, and, turn off the, like, there's going to be, curfew for electricity, and da-da-da-da-da. And a lot of the messaging of that, like, we even get, like, radio broadcasts and stuff like that, is very utilizing and building upon like World War II and even Vietnam, or like American sort of like rah, 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 we should do our duty for the troops across the seas messaging. And it's very much steeped in specific American like visual and auditory language and history, which is fine. I think that actually lends it an interesting like pull that we're pulling from those things of like, yeah, we're all going to do our part for the country sort of thing. But it also just it made it a little less interesting to me in the sense, like, if we're going to argue, like, oh, we're going to pull together for family and da-da-da-da-da, and yet you're still centering it very much in America, American aesthetics, American history. And I know Marvel is always very America forward, right? But it is a subtle difference from something like Superman, which ironically enough, Superman has always been associated with the American way, but what I liked in particular about Superman the movie was it took pains to make this point of, he cares about everybody. Like, there's this whole thing about, I think, Jaranpur or whatever, the very Israel-Palestine or Russia-Ukraine metaphor that was going on in that movie, and he was like, I'm on the side of the oppressed, I'm on the side of the Palestinians, I'm on the side of being, like, he's a global, he's there for everybody, and he is a person that is there for everybody, and we got scenes showcasing people in other countries and how they think about Superman and how they feel about Superman. Whereas here with Fantastic Four, we do get a sense of how the average people think about the Fantastic Four, but they are very American-centric. And again, it's not wrong necessarily, but it is a distinct difference. So when you have this sort of storyline, it's like, yeah, we all need to pull together. It gives this sort of like, pull together for the state a little bit more than it does the, like, we pull together because we care about humanity as family. And it's a very subtle difference. And maybe it's just me that's reading, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it doesn't make me hate the movie or anything like that. But it was like a subtle difference between, something like what this movie's doing about, like, hey, we all sacrifice for, something larger than ourselves, which is the Fantastic Four or the state, versus Superman, which kind of has this more like, hey, we're citizens of a global thing. We all should care about each other and stop oppression of any type of people from above hurting those below, and just stop being oppressive. And it kind of connects also too with this interesting, that's usually not how people talk about Marvel versus DC, especially in the comics, which is the Fantastic Four, and this is kind of a problem with Marvel movies in general, are like the great men above us. Like they're clearly rich, they clearly have a ton of money, they live in the tower. Again, this is baked into the Fantastic Four. This is not the movie's fault, this is just part of the Fantastic Four story. But it's just something that, again, a taste thing for me, of like, oh, they're rich, they're above us, everyone idolizes them. It's part of the genre to a degree. But if you compare that to Superman, and the movie, again, like, yeah, Superman's powerful and he sort of unilaterally makes decisions at certain points for humanity, but, like, the movie tries to make pains to say, like, hey, I am just like every one of you. I eat at a hot dog vendor. I have a normal kind of job working as a journalist, and that I'm not particularly, the best at. Like, I'm good at being a journalist, but not great. And, like, he's just an average guy who happens to have powers is kind of the vibe of that movie, and he chose that. Like, the whole movie's like, he chose to be this thing. He doesn't want to rule over people. And I liked that as compared to this movie, where we get, like, again, the Tony Stark kind of thing, where, like, they're rich, they're above us, they're the great men who we kind of should, listen to and sacrifice for. To a degree. And as I've hinted at, I do think it's an interesting, like, difference between those two movies, because that is actually generally switched up from how the comics of Marvel versus DC are talked about. DC is usually the series that most people discuss as, being about gods above men, like the Supermans, on Mount Olympus, the Zeuses, the Hades, the Hermes, like Flash, Batman, Superman of it all. And Marvel is usually the one that is like, hey, everyday people just happen to be superheroes, kind of like Captain America and Spider-Man, very like everyday people who just happen to get superpowers. So I think it's interesting that, like, the dichotomy that I am getting here between these two movies is kind of the opposite, that Marvel's kind of focusing on the gods among us, sort of, that we create in our culture through, like, the great manifying, the tech billionaire CEO kind of folks, which, the Fantastic Four don't seem to be, but they do seem to be rich in sort of that sort of way, versus Superman, who is generally seen as, like, the god among men, and the movie takes pains to be like, no, he's an average guy who just happened to get powers. So interesting just shift there in terms of the movie versus the comic stuff. Again, it's not like the movie's leaning super heavy into they're the great men of society or whatever, but it is like a subtle just thematic difference that, like, I think keeps me from enjoying Fantastic Four more than Superman, just on that thematic basis, because there's so many similarities between these movies in a lot of respects. And I think I really liked the more, global citizen and more everyday citizen vibe that Superman gives versus Fantastic Four, which is like very much steeped in specific Americana, and is much more about like these characters who are, rich and, people to idolize, but like people that like, we seem to have this like sort of great man-ifying thing going on with them. Again, subtle thing, but it is just something as someone who's been writing a lot about like these subtle themes and messages of our culture. And just something that I couldn't not clock. And just like, I'd say I don't hate it. It doesn't mean it should bother you as much as it bothers me, but it was just something that I thought of. But at the end of the day, I thought this was a really, really great movie. It has me very excited to kind of see where we're going to go with Avengers Doomsday. I've been very out on Avengers Doomsday pretty much from jump when they announced, Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Dr. Doom. And then it just feels like this exercise in desperate nostalgia to try to get people back in on a, franchise that has been, kind of floundering. And so it's been like, all right, we'll go back to the old favorites to make you guys come back. So that's kind of got me down. This is the first time where I got to the end of the movie and like they had the hint of Doctor Doom showing up. And I was like, okay, now I'm actually kind of interested in that movie because I care about these characters. Don't necessarily care about the kid, but I care about how these characters feel about the kid. I like these people. I like the Fantastic Four quite a lot. And so that has me interested in going in, not nostalgia, not the, oh, look, it's a face I like. It's I am invested in these characters, and now I want to see them in the next thing. Something that Marvel has seemingly forgotten in a lot of senses about making me care about, a specific group of people before you do the big team up thing. It's kind of also why Thunderbolts weirdly kind of worked, because I cared about, not all of those characters, but like I cared about a significant amount of those characters, weirdly enough, even though they're movies that they came before, movies and TV shows that they were in before this, like Yelena's, weren't particularly great. Like Black Widow and Hawkeye that she was in were not particularly fantastic, but I liked her a lot. And so I actually cared about her, and that's why I like Thunderbolts a lot, because of characters like her. Same thing here. So, it matters that I care about these characters. So that it's the first time I'm actually really looking forward to Avengers Doomsday because of this movie, which is a good place for Marvel to be in. So I think at the end of the day, there's a couple touchstones and things and themes in this movie that I particularly just bristle up against. But on the whole, I thought this was a really, really great movie, a great step forward, a great first step forward for the Fantastic Four, but also for Marvel. And I think they really needed right now. So hopefully you can keep this momentum up. That's my thoughts, though, on Fantastic Four First Steps. I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below as well, though. You can yell at Aaron for, going out and having a life and not doing this with me. But other than that, I hope you all are taking care of yourselves. And as always, live long and prosper.